everyone, it's Brian and Eric here. We wanted to do a new video on one of our favorite stocks, Intel, or basically ticker INTC, because it broke out of the trading range of what we were talking about on our prior video of the 20 to 25. It actually broke that. So we wanted to do an update. It's starting to get a little more traction out there. There's, a lot more people talking about it now. Whereas, if you look like, especially weeks back or a month back, there's just a bunch of bashing. Everyone's saying, hey, this is a crappy company, it's worth almost nothing, yada, yada. Yet what we saw was way different than what a lot of people were seeing. And if you look at it, we think from, kind of like a bird's eye view, it looks pretty obvious. Now, of course, don't take our word for any of this. Do your own research. Don't trust anything we say. This is just our opinion. Yada, yada, yada. We could be full of BS. Who knows? So this is just what we see and what we like right here. So what is with Intel? Why do we think that this is a stock that could possibly 5 to 10x over the next few years? Well, a few things. One, historically it has been a juggernaut, and unfortunately, it used to have the high in the 70s. Then it, basically dipped down to like, in like the 20s. And stayed that way for a long, long time. But there's a few things in the past few years that made this really important and shows a lot of very positive things that could happen. One is that it's of very, very strategic importance to the U.S. As far as chip making goes. If you remember back in the COVID times, what happened? All these places shut down. It was hard to, ship all the stuff from overseas. You had all these other issues. And we realized kind of like, hey, if all our chips are being made overseas, if anything happens, we're kind of screwed from, not only just like, computers and phones and, cars even, but just think of like the military. I mean, if you get screwed on that, if you can't make all this fancy equipment that helps defend us, you're basically screwed. And in 2022, the Biden administration basically passed what was called the Chips and Science Act, which essentially was billions of dollars that was meant to help kind of get chip manufacturing moved to the U.S. And one of the biggest benefactors of that was meant to be Intel. Now, when you're talking about like manufacturing chips, this is not the kind of thing that's like, okay, I'll build a plant and I'll start making them next month. This isn't like you're building a house or a warehouse or anything like that. These kinds of things can take years and years and years. So there's a bit of a delayed time to get that going. But when Trump came into office, they kind of realized the same thing. Hey, we really want to move more of that manufacturing into the States, into the U.S. And who naturally would be one of the best ones to do that? Intel. One of, again, historically, the bigger U.S. businesses in that field. And they're pretty much one of the only ones that would have a good shot of actually doing this, what we feel is kind of the best bet.
Only bet, really.
Yeah. And it's like, again, just from like a national security standpoint, kind of has to happen. And when you have something like that it has to happen, that makes it, in our opinion, even more of a safer bet. And that's why, the U.S. has been supporting this, has been basically pushing it more and more and more. You have to have the supply chain in the U.S. for stuff like that. And who better to basically do that than Intel itself? But it's not just that the administration is saying, hey, we need to have chip making moved in the U.S. Hey, this Intel place is already working on that, already has a lot of stuff in the works on that. But on top of that, what we also really like is not just the national security concerns that it would basically address, but the fact that they're actually coming out with stuff now that is actually beating the competition. That a lot of people aren't actually talking about, a lot of people aren't in the know, and we feel like a lot of people on Wall Street, a lot of the analysis and all those guys aren't seeing this. They're looking at the charts.
You need to be a bit of a nerd to understand why this is probably going to play out beyond the national security, like you're alluding to on the tech side. There's strong reason to believe that Intel's about to become the mega beast that they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that like I've been looking in the news. I've been looking on like forums and Reddit and all these places online looking at what are people saying about Intel, what's the talk about Intel, and almost all of them are missing what we see as the really big white elephant in the room right here. That they have some amazing products again that right now are beating the competition. So even outside of the national security concerns and all that, we think this could be a huge one just upon that. So I'll let you chat a little bit about that, Eric. I know you have obviously a background in software developing and all that stuff, and you're much more of like a nerd on this stuff than some of us are. But I'll let you basically take it away on that stuff.
Do you want to look at the chart first? I almost feel like that's slightly more exciting in a sense, just because we're here on the trade side. But
yeah, that's actually a great point.
Yeah, so let's just look at the chart. So the first, I think the Intel video we did last time was end of 2024. Now, if you remember, if you saw any of our webinars or discussion about kind of just trading setups, we drew this red line, I think in November. Look at just how it's obeying this bottoming process here. This is the 4-hour, 180-day chart. And then look at the volume profile. So you can see all of the buying was occurring down at the lower end of this range. And now, and this is the reason we kind of said, all right, let's do another Intel video. We can see that it's starting to break out and poke its head out above the range. Now let's go to the daily. We've got actually some gaps that are going to start closing up in the 30 area. So let's look at daily. So you can see we've still got a gap to close. If we go to the bottom of the wick at like 28, let's say. So the way I was doing this, I've been accumulating all the way down here. And actually, one more quick comment just on volume. So remember the volume profile on that 4-hour chart. You can also just kind of like unfocus your eyes a little. You can see how much more buying's happening here than has in these previous periods. So the setup, just from a technical perspective, is fantastic. And we're starting to poke our head up above that range. So the probability of gap fill at that 28 to 29 range is very, very high, and probably going to happen, barring some sort of pullback in the wider markets, before middle summer, going into like August, September area. So opportunity there for sure on the call side. Now, we already did do some calls and made some good money with those 2 weeks ago. I think Sean made a video about that and showed his trade there. I think you also got in on that, Brian. And then we were saying the new, is that right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you did. Okay, so and then we were saying, okay, let's move out of that 25, 26 call range, and we're going to move it up to 30. And we're looking at August, September on those. They're already profitable. And we'll see what happens in the next couple months. Our wider kind of macro view has been for a while now. We could see a 10-15% pullback in the S&P, the NASDAQ, that'll pull everything down with it. And then if we're lucky, I'm actually kind of hoping this happens, because I wouldn't mind adding some additional shares. We can get into that lower 22 range on Intel to finalize our positions. Now, so that's how we see the technical side of this. Let's also look on the tech side of this. So what's coming up that could just really be a game changer in the chip fab business, which really there's only been one game in town for the past 4 or 5 years, and that's TSM, Taiwan Superconductor, right? And they make these fabs. They're down to 2 Newton meters. Intel 18A, which Pat Gelsinger, the former CEO, said he bet the entire company on. 18A means 1.8 Newton meters. So this is a very small line that they're running the electrons down inside of the CPU, right? So they're gonna become the foundry really for the world if they can prove this out and get their yield, the chip yield out of the process into a profitable range. You could see Apple come back. I believe Microsoft and Amazon have already signed up with them. Apple moved to TSM. Apple's playing with internal production, but not at the foundry level. So that's another thing that should be clarified here too. Like NVIDIA, they use TSM, right? So they buy the fab from TSM and then they build their chip on top of it. And Intel's kind of they've lost a lot of market share in this space. But now with 18A coming out, and just in the last few days here, this is what's causing this breakout, is they're saying it's working. We've got it, and 2025 is our release date, and we can now start selling this process to chip designers. So what is 18A? Basically, it's a competitor to TSM. So this is a whole new addressable market for Intel, or kind of going back to what was their addressable market 10 years ago. And they kind of lost it on the foundries development side. So now Intel is using another one of our picks that we love. They're using the brand new, let me go to this. They're using the brand new EUV tech from ASML. So really the only company on earth that creates these UV line generating devices is ASML. So Intel has bought and is using a brand new tech from ASML called EUV to write these lines out. TSM doesn't have this yet. So right off the bat, Intel and ASML are like this match made in heaven. And I believe, I need to confirm this, but I don't think that China's allowed to buy from ASML, so they're using something else, or they're using older tech from ASML. So that's really interesting and really cool. So Intel has a bunch of leg ups here on this next series of process and fabs that's coming out with the 2 nm, 2 Newton meter. Am I right about that? Nm is Newton meter? I'm not going to Google it right now. Is that right, Brian?
Sounds right. But...
Yeah. I'm sure it's on this page. 2 nm. I want to make sure I'm saying that right. But the other thing that 18A does differently, and this is brand new tech, they're calling it power via, but they're basically injecting electricity into the backside of the chip rather than up from the bottom, and that lets them burst electrons down these lines really quickly from 0 amp to max, without causing like a mixed signal where an electron will jump onto another line that causes a false bit right through the system. So new tech across the board with this, and a lot of people this is kind of the reason Intel was selling off. People were betting against 18A being able to come into fruition. Well, here we are. They've proved it out. Literally in the last couple of days, they said, "Here, nope, it's ready. You can start placing orders." So this is going to be really amazing for the share price of Intel.
And I just actually verified you were right that
that's Newton meters.
that the 2 nm does mean 2 nanometers. And for those that are curious, a nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter.
I was saying Newton, which is actually, I think, a physics.
So very small.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for looking that up. Yeah, I'm software development, not hardware guy. I geek out about it, but I can't speak to it 100%. Okay, so at this kind of 10,000 foot view, point is, Intel could become the number one foundry on planet Earth. Then B, you got that national security component of it, like you were saying, Brian. And there's this impetus for the U.S. government to make this happen too. Okay, so number 2, the Gaudi 3 chip. This is really interesting. This is designed for AI, and what you can do as a customer of Intel is put together different fabrics of chips that interlink. So you can say, I want to focus on training an LLM, right? So then Intel's going to create a chip for you specifically where they put their multiple nodes of training focused chips, and then there's another side of the AI LLM piece, which is the inference component. So training puts together the LLM kind of math set that looks to place, this character goes after this character statistically. This word goes after this word. So that's the training part of an LLM, right? So you go to ChatGPT, you ask it a question, it's doing some word math to say this is the most likely combination to answer your question. Then there's inference. Inference in AI is the component of it that looks to answer a question with, I'm not going to say knowledge, but putting together kind of future projecting what that training math would suggest. So then a customer of Intel can come in and say, okay, we want to create a server farm that focuses on training, and we also want a server farm that focuses on inference. So this is kind of brand new and really great way of thinking about it. Actually, it's sort of analogous to the way AMD, which took market share from Intel, and the way that AMD did that in 2016-ish was to say, instead of trying to go for faster hertz, a faster chip, let's put together, let's multi-thread. So let's embed, really what boils down to just being multiple CPUs into one die. And whereas Intel said, we'll have 2 cores and they'll just be really fast. AMD said, let's put multiple cores together and make them a little slower. So you can kind of think of Gaudi 3 as similar to that conceptually, where they're going to put these nodes together, and then the customer of Intel can say, I want to focus on this, I want to focus on that for as far as AI goes. So what this is going to do is take away market share from Intel, because they're designing these chips instead of being run on the GPU, right? So in fact, it says right here, easy migration of GPU-based models. So now, instead of having to create server farms of these expensive NVIDIA cards, you can create these up to 32-node cluster Intel-based CPUs. And then the other thing they're doing with this too is they're thinking about things like Ethernet, right? So being able to have these server farms interconnect and kind of become one super brain of chips that are talking to each other to put together these LLM math models and things like that, right? So super fast. This is going to be another game changer, and this is just coming out 2025. So we've got two big killers 2025 so far. We got 18A later half of the year. You watch if Apple says, we're going to start building on 18A, Intel's stock price is going to go ballistic, okay? And then we've got Gaudi 3. As this becomes adopted, you're going to see it show up in their income statements, right? The other thing, and this is a side note, I guess, but it really could become a huge piece of Intel's business, is they're actually starting to focus on creating GPUs. So they created the Battlemage Arc GPUs, and they just came out with the, what's the model? It's the 580, which competes with and is much cheaper than NVIDIA's 4060, which is kind of their last generation of GPU from NVIDIA. So if Intel nails this down, they're gonna be like a combo of TSM, AMD, and NVIDIA. And 10 years ago, Intel really was that kind of primary kind of tech semiconductor company. We could see them coming back, and all on the tech side looks like that's going to happen. Long story short, this is a game changer, and kind of like you always see right before a big shift in market is the stock sells off, right? So it gets shaken out for whatever reason, and there were some legit reasons to shake out Intel. They were losing market share to AMD. Pat Gelsinger bet the company on 18A. Nobody knew if it was going to play out. Well, here we are now, bottoming out at like 2010 prices. And if all of this plays out that we just discussed, Intel's $100 to $200 stock. That means, at the top of the range, let's say $200 by 2030, something like that. If you got in at 20, that's a 10x, okay? And you're buying a solid company that, even if this doesn't fully play out, they're still undervalued. Let me pull up again. Go ahead, Brian.
And as you're pulling up that, one thing I absolutely love about stuff like this, it's like there's multiple different products, multiple different lifelines being thrown out there. So it's like with some companies out there that are hurting, it's like they have one lifeline and they either have to make it or they bomb. Whereas here, again, there's multiple ones coming out, multiple products. If even let's say half of them do really, really well, that's still a game changer. If all of them do well, which, we feel there's a good shot at that, that'd be,
Mega game
absolutely
changer.
game changing here. And with that, once you share off that next bit, Eric, if you could touch on a little bit on like the foundry services, on like what kind of timeline are you seeing on that?
Oh, so Intel is saying late 2025. So it's coming this year. Now they've put out articles, and Google this Intel 18A. Read what other people are saying. So like Tom's Hardware is a great site that can comment on 18A from a very technical at a technical level, or just check kind of the social media world of things and see what people are saying about 18A in little quick summary comments. But this is real. It's no longer 2024 18A maybe is coming, maybe not. Intel just put this page out in the last couple days, and what do they say? 18A is now ready. So 18A is now ready for customer projects, right? With tape outs beginning in the first half of 2025. So this is no longer speculation. This is coming. So then the question is, okay, how quick does adoption happen? Does everybody just stick with TSM like they have been, or do they start migrating into 18A? So that's the way I'm looking at it. I also just love the price level we're getting at, frankly. If you're buying this in the low 20s, I mean the risk is about as good as it can get, right? So, yeah, really liking it.
Yeah, so with that, I think the final thoughts of the conclusion that we have on that is, first of all, obviously liking the stock. I think there's a lot of good stuff going for it right there. One of the big things that I'm sure a lot of you are probably thinking is, well, what news should you be looking for? What should you be looking at to see if this is going to plan? Well, first of all, obviously, if you follow us, we'll be giving updates on this as we see it.
We'll put out calls. I sold calls this week when it spiked to 27. Sold the 33 calls against my shares. Great trade, right? Because it pulled back the next day, which you just knew was going to happen. In fact, Brian and I were talking the other day, and where's this going to go this week? Well, these breakouts take time to develop, so it's going to close right at the former breakout, right? Because the market's not going to make it this easy. So we think this range is what we watch. Could we see this gap fill here down to 2250 or so on a wider market pullback? Sure. And that would be an amazing place to start buying some calls into the latter half of the year.
Yeah, and I think as far as what news to look for, I mean, there's really, I'd say, three big things. I mean, one is see if there's any news from like the Trump administration, if they're basically pushing more of like bringing the chip making to the U.S., if they're specifically mentioning Intel, which they've been doing all that stuff already. But if they push that more, that might be even more of a thing to pay attention to. Another big thing is when the news hits, when they have a new CEO. So right now they have an interim one. When they get the new CEO, we'll have to look at, hey, who is this guy or who is this gal?
They should hire Pat back, really.
Yeah.
Because if this plays out, I mean, the man's he's an engineer, so he's not just a numbers man or kind of dialed into the market like a lot of CEOs. He's a real chip engineer.
Yeah.
And he made this happen, so I give the man credit. He bet the company on it, and it's going to play out.
Yeah, and if it shows that regardless if they hire him or like a different person, if they hire a person that, let's say, has a bunch of ties to places like Apple and whatnot, and some possibly other big clients that they could possibly get, that would probably be a very good sign. Anyone with a lot of experience in this area, very big sign. So I would look for probably an increase. If there's anyone even legitimately good there, I would also look at, hey, if there's any kind of partnerships or additional clients that are announced. Like if you have a place like essentially Apple jumping on this, again, that would probably skyrocket, the value of the stocks right there. And it would be a good kind of trend indicator that, hey, if a handful of these other big places are moving, usually everyone else tends to kind of follow. And that'd be, again, very, very good indicator right there. And, again, I'm not worried too much about the short term. As we say with most stocks, it's kind of easy to see things from like a bird's eye view, but it's very hard to say what will happen in the next day or two.
Yeah,
uh,
impossible.
so
That's
hey,
why you want to go a little longer dated on your calls here.
yeah, and in the
Because
next
could
day,
this happen? Absolutely, right?
yeah, and like in the next day, if it basically goes from basically 25 to 22, hey, I'm not terribly worried about that. Again, that could be more of a buying opportunity. If it goes down to 20, that'd be even more of a buying opportunity.
Man, those if we get down to 20, just calls to 25 again are going to be
Yeah,
huge, and
like
and pretty safe.
I'm looking more like months out, possibly even like years out. But again, this is one where we're not saying it's like, it could be a 5 to 10x, in the next month or two or anything like that. This isn't a meme stock or anything like that.
Not
We're
yet.
saying, hey, this could be a huge winner this year, but definitely when you look, years out, this could easily be a 5 to 10x years out from right here. And, hey, those are the kind of things that, if you look at the risk, in our opinion, it's not terribly high. There's not a huge amount of downside. It's not like a lot of meme stocks out there where it's like, there's no real value. They could plummet to almost zero. I mean, can anything plummet? Sure. I mean, for all we know,
Well,
all
we've
the
seen Intel plummet.
could be nuked. So if there's nukes dropped on it, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no like guarantees of any of this, but from like a risk standpoint, I don't really view this as having much more of a downside. Now, we could be
Yeah,
way off, we could be entirely wrong. Do your own research, but this is the kind of thing that I feel, not a ton of downside, but
it's the type of
possibly
solid idea that you can get
a huge amount
behind,
of upside.
and you can put
Yeah.
your money behind it. Yeah,
Yep.
it's not gambling on Rivian or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, I like it. I'll leave it up to you, Eric, if there's anything else you want to end with right here or point out.
Nope. All good. Happy
All
trading,
righty
people.
then. So with
Thanks.
that, we like it, and if you want to look for more of our updates on it to kind of follow along, we'll be announcing any major kind of changes that we see on this, as far as well as some other stocks and stuff too. Make sure to follow us below. Click the subscribe button. Like us if you want. And with that, guys, we'll talk to you
Or
soon.
don't like
Take
us. It's
care.
fine too. Thanks, Brian. Bye.
All right. See you.